Nyonji Morzor Numejon, Zoner Monum Jimborga Gada, Bakar Darganzanto, Shermurdo, Stumbatic Janla Jonzorlo, Nijor Terni Jangamsa, Jaurtiction, Laela, Jimmy Benzo Jala Sorado, Condu Tobambo Roshinjilo, Condu Tobambo Roshinjilo, Condu Tobambo Roshinjilo.
Profound and subtle Dharma is rarely encountered in eons. Now we can hear and follow it. May we realize the Tathagata's meaning. To liberate all the sentient beings, please give rise to the unsurpassed and supreme bodhicitta.
Zopa Topchang, Shopcher Namsa Children Joan Jimber Shepaji Yen Nagang, Start Nala Kimdak Listin Zon Wati, Kipa Tarmo Jerte, Shanchu Sanwa Sayan Polanderkut Chiba, Kiwi Chimbo, Lon Zamalong, Semchen, Ganjig Nam, Sempuana, Tinyan Kur Chimbo, Chungar Namji Sonum Saksha, Gendan Lab Surnum Chane. Gesta Mambo Jabrushina, Simpuba Ganzal de la Pamba dans Tara Churter Toberanger. Tenation of Sanga Sayambu Lander Mebar Puba Chembo, the Kasanji Shan of La Tene, Maunwa dans Tartarji Simpson Nam La Pambi, Chet, Jones to Jabrushate, Puba Chembo, Maunwa dans Tarti Simpson Ganjik. Simpunes, Hanji Jim San Langsik Tobatan, Shanchu San San Langsik Tobatan, Ransanji Jim San. Langsik Tuberger Nati, Digbadan, Dambagam, Digbadan, Merdumbe, Kanzo Sayan, Kanzo Sayan, Tamchit Tara Toberan Jeroka, Chazar Kibagam, Vedme Kanjik Sombetis, Kivisava, Mabjubchan, Dugbele, Chi Mambo, Somkanjiana, Sendam Pupis Jis, Ti, Nyankur Chimbo, Chunga Takatela, gave Sunum Chambana, Telati, gave a tetale, Danchak Chikzam, Toba Yano. Di Chikcha, Di Cha Trigno, gave a ship up or Ranilla, Pamba Yeno. Dina Maunwa dan Tartarji, Riki Vogam, Riki Omo Kanjika, Devan Sorvitis, gave up Dripper Shena. Di Gesta Tamcha the Ranrango, Toba Yeno, Martabi, Chavdag, Martabin Chavdag of the Chimbo Namji, Labor and Jera Cha Mamchi La. Namjik de lepti shini vatat and temperature na Rangrang, Gavatan, Digbir Namjang, Mashi, Jabdam Chokdanji Nandar, Moatan, Longarta, Changme, Shinji Lemkan Namji, Tir, Girdig Transin, Shevi, Varta, Litin, Lilen Matapchan, Namjik Dedak, Transim Jirji, Rangrang Ledam Temperstia Lemba Yono, Tia Malunji Varta. Odongada, Dinger Japchak Mambo, Nyamsum Nyong, Guna, Musung Ansong, Ane, Source, Homer, Dinger, not Mumago, so. Tina Sempo Kanza Kanji, Stial and Matepi, Verta, Jardin Chokdanjin under Kachik Reji, Janjanga Nyemjer, and Sharif Chigbi, Virgit Namla, gave Sonum La Virgit Namla, gave Sonum. La Tenne, Rang Tele, Chorvi, Resmund Churjin Yotchan, Namjik Ti Tele, Garvana, Semchente, Ranga Le La Tenne, Lernum Yamsum Yua Yeno. Catcher Digba Chimbu Kanzak Yenna, Digba Chimbu Kanzak Yenna, Love Jap Chakstonga Nanda, Love Jap Chakstonga, Jap Chakstonchaka Nanda, Tarika Mamchizo. Catchum Samepa. Shibi Ganzrian, Kara Tomchak Chapchak Varta, Nera Chimbo Tone, Tangi, Dungar Yamsum Yor and Yoro, the near Popa Chimbo, Dichingi Semchen Kanjik Sempoana, Sharif Chibi, Nemjer Namti, Tela Gia, Dripi Chet, Gendan Bala, Dixutan, Rishago, Testana, Dixuti Yerdan, Dixuti Tigi Shavi Rambanam, Mazuki Varta, Jechengi Kawatan, Tsudmi Loma, So Gang Dondut, Til. Sala Gandondo, the Salandor, Mashago, Tomer Sanji, and Gendan Namla, Zegi Pet Mamchid Varda, Hunda, Rangalons of Shubria, Mashago. Garte Trishina, Zumba Meshipe, Ganzak, the same Puber Gerana, the Payonam, Tobram Mangero. Ganzak, Ganjik, Zonji, Samja, Tetarle, Labra of Jona, Tomer Sanji, and Gendan Namla, Zepet Jim, Chodne, Sempuba, Tabi. 게스압 든착 치 토버런 여로 디나 뽑아 쳔보 장왕랑 그 샘진 강지 랑가 파마다 님즈속 남직 쳔푸아나 하우즘 더베게 든라 드수 정비 샤와라 좀브르샤오 데르트르시비 쇼오동 송봉 니가라야 판바 토버런 여로 데르크도 송바나 섬치ጻ섬기 하이 푸장네 동적 접촉시야 척긴 장원랑 그 샘신 한제 탐치 기블라나미 비상집 쇼도 샘기버 겨도 되니 겸덕 뽑아 침부 경 기베 시험사르네 송 사이냥 보사 모름 김도레 쇼오동 솜볼 남라 판버르비 레거테 덤바고 양티체 흑적리 나던 코피 장메 빈제이 겨보 신지 라이버 남 탐치 섬치 짝섬기네스 존던데 갈라와터 동오 데라 띵은 잔진제 겨보던 득바마윈제 겨보던 솜바 침본제 겨보던 까름도 스탁건제 겨보던 청도 스탁건제 겨보던 만도 스탁건제 겨보던 띵은 땅위 띵은 상윈제 겨보던 리보 프윈제 겨보던 토굿 스나윈제 겨보던 샹소 잔진제 겨보던 무동 잔진제 겨보던 잔진 샹진 자인제 겨보던 도크르wen제 겨보던 도 그런지 겨보던 자시 덕분지 겨보던 노시 논세 덕분지 겨보던 제기 덕분지 겨보던 노르기 덕분지 겨보 시기 덕분지 겨보던 시 덕분지 겨보던 찬전 덕분지 겨보던 농국 덕분지 겨보던 시비 덕분지 겨보던 쭉 덕분지 겨보던 나기 덕분지 겨보던 냉크 덕분지 겨보던 무슨 전진지 겨보던 무지 전진지 겨보던 문안 전진지 겨보던吃了是这点不当，吃了是亲本这一点不当，吃了茶这一点不当，吃了茶亲本这一点不当，安诺真这一点不当，安诺茶亲本这一点不拉，说把带到他们这让人跟口儿出动这跟这一点。穷남당 한직든 자만은 거니 소소네 랑랑거 레스낭당 샤테 왕기로 쉐도 제이절포테덕당 신질히버 남 대비정식 비점처럼 샹습선 훌도블라테네 사이냥부 신립김 탈라테네 섬치작섬네 네들 동네 쇼직던 코도 디세 신질히비 비모이 발항아 살랍증네 타르모제데 존던델란더것도 소 좀밥 존던덴더 덕저남당 제이절보 남 대비정식 비점처럼 샹습선 침보 사이냥부 신립기 님탈라테네 섬치작섬네 네들 추지 짜르다 저침보된 코데 덕적 남기장 개와당 판바 적거 토바라 럭나 어다가 다동저와 종주도 독배 좀든디 라 기베 저버 시에나 좀든디 기 특세 침보 공데 덕적 락탄덕 소르테네 좀든디 신질 히요라 갑사와 교지 저들은 도바전도 저르기당 덕거 란다버 샤오 디 신질 히베 좀든데 랍샤 사르네 묵문점버타다 샹수성화 사이냐볼라요 테니 존던델란더크도 소로 좀밥 존던데 덕급테나 샹수성화 사이냐본딘 조아르지거는 언더 탑스르 잡적 동적도 말았테니 예니 교와던 나르트 메프르 득득고는 버셈전다도 조름 자창 샹수성화 침본돌라티 타유삼기 메치비 점처가비 ngawe marnam chambar ngawe semsen nam digbur narman le yongsu chorum zannagang di marang war laryan ngansongo nesar longwaran geram thongo zambab jumdande shanchu sanwa sai nyambo de tip samgi mikibi zimchir gir tob dan danna semchen da jibshir da gibi lamla tenne tangi tari komo tobra mavsheda jumdan de ji di tonu dagla tandok sur
Now let us continue with the Ksitigarbha Sutra. This week's classes will be on Monday, Tuesday, Friday, and Saturday. There will be no classes on Wednesday and Thursday. Today we will continue with the chapter on benefiting the living and the deceased. This chapter mainly teaches about how the living can gain benefits and how the deceased who have already passed away can gain benefits. It is taught from these two perspectives. First, let me briefly share with you all that long ago during the Song dynasty, there was a town called Liao. This town of Liao had about 1,000 households. This town flourished in every way. Later, the population grew and grew, reaching about 2,000 households. Near these 2,000 households, there was an ancient monastery. In this monastery, there was enshrined a statue of Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, as well as a statue of Buddha Amitabha. The statue of Buddha Amitabha was relatively tall. There was also a statue of Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva. The local people had especially strong faith in these three statues of the Buddha and Bodhisattvas, and they would also frequently recite the Avalokiteshvara Sutra and the Sutra of the 10 Wheels of Ksitigarbha. They held these two sutras in very high regard. People would frequently go to pay homage, make offerings, and prostrate. In this way, light would frequently emanate from the statues. They were extremely, extremely efficacious. Later on, an epidemic appeared, just like the pandemic we are facing now. A great epidemic broke out. Many, many local people died. At that time, there was a town mayor, like a village leader today, there was a town mayor. This town mayor, in order to prevent the epidemic, continuously and very sincerely prayed to Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva. Later, many of the local people did not die. Everyone believed it must be the blessing of Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva. Among them, there was a woman who had already died, but she did not have faith in Buddhism. She had faith in worldly gods. Not long after she died, after one day, she came back to life. After coming back to life, she was deeply sorrowful. She immediately ran to that monastery. She prostrated to Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva, saying, "I want to become ordained." The monks at the local monastery asked her why. She then recounted her own experiences after death. She said that perhaps some evil ghosts escorted her to the Lord of Death. Along the way, she was extremely frightened. The God she believed in was also subdued. But later, when she saw a monk, those evil ghosts escorting her became extremely frightened and all departed. Later, she learned that this monk was actually Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva. Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva also taught her many things. Why in the human realm she did not have correct faith, why she created such karma and fell into the intermediate state. If she were to return, she should properly take refuge in the 3 jewels and become ordained as a nun. After hearing this, she returned. After returning, she truly made a vow at the monastery to become ordained. Later, she became an extremely devout ordained person. So, in this story, it also teaches that when we encounter epidemics or disasters of the 4 elements, at such times, if we wholeheartedly pray to Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva, many man-made or natural disasters, including personal obstacles arising from internal imbalance of the 4 elements, all kinds of adverse conditions and obstacles, all of these can be dispelled one by one, especially in this present era. For the entire world, it is relatively, we can say the situation is not very optimistic. When we check the news, we should be able to see that compared to a previous period of time, the circumstances of all people may have different uncertain factors. So at such a special time, it is especially necessary to pray to Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva. Let us first pray together.
Shanzub Sanwa Sanwa Jimbo Sai Nyambo La Sham Salon Chodo Gyasum Cheo. Shanzub Sanwa Sanwa Jimbo Sai Nyambo La Sham Salon Chodo Gyasum Cheo. Shanzub Sanwa Sanwa Jimbo Sai Nyambo La Sham Salon Chodo Gyasum Cheo. 上周三花三花清波塞娘波拉香藏龙出多教上周三花三花清波塞娘波拉香藏龙出多教孙子三花三花清波塞娘波拉香藏龙出多教孙子上周三花三花清波塞娘波拉香藏龙出多教孙子上周三花三花清波塞娘波拉香藏龙出多教孙子 Shanchu Sanhua Sanhua Jimbo Sai Nyambo La Shang Tsamlum Chodo Gyasum Ji Shanchu Sanhua Sanhua Jimbo Sai Nyambo La Shang Tsamlum Chodo Gyasum Ji Shanchu Sanhua Sanhua Jimbo Sai Nyambo La Shang Tsamlum Chodo Gyasum Ji O Sai Nyambo Juji Duji Dom Zabar Monum Jinze Nibi Lame Ishi Jemzhi Jinzha Tenja Kunur Dongsun Gyur Sho.
Now let us continue to study the Ksitigarbha Sutra. Earlier we already discussed the merits that the deceased can receive when we, the people living in the human realm, perform virtuous deeds on their behalf, or what kind of merits will they receive. This has already been taught earlier. Starting from today we will discuss that. At that time, after the Buddha finished speaking these words, there was an elder in the assembly. This elder's name was Great Eloquence. He must have been extremely skilled in debate. This elder had actually long ago already realized the Dharma of non-arising emptiness. This elder appeared to be a lay practitioner, but in reality he was completely like Vimalakirti, an extremely remarkable great lay practitioner. In appearance he was an ordinary householder, but in reality he had realized emptiness. And he was liberating many sentient beings of the 10 directions. His activities were also extremely vast. Actually, throughout Buddhist history, there have been those who appeared in the form of lay practitioners, but in reality were able to benefit many sentient beings. In Buddhist history, there have been such people. This lay practitioner was also like this. He appeared to be just an ordinary lay practitioner, but in reality, he enabled sentient beings in the 10 directions, east, south, west, north, above and below, to all attain liberation. He still appeared as an elder, and he probably would not show himself before others as a realized being or as one who liberates sentient beings. He appeared as an ordinary lay practitioner. Before Buddha Shakyamuni, he joined his palms respectfully. At that time, he asked Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva, Mahasattva, after the beings of Jambudvipa die, if there are many different kinds of relatives, for example, if one's parents die, and in their household there are people of all ages, or among friends and relatives there are also people of all ages, and these people cultivate merit for the deceased, including making vegetarian meal offerings, offering to the Sangha, making offerings and creating all kinds of virtuous causes, freeing lives, lighting butter lamps, reciting sutras, building statues, as well as practicing generosity, keeping precepts and cultivating patience, all these kinds of virtuous causes. What benefits or liberation can this deceased being obtain, because the person has already departed, and actually family members or their friends and relatives or people connected to them create merit and virtuous deeds for them? How much benefit in terms of human and celestial realms does the person themselves receive? Or what kind of liberation from samsara do they obtain? This was his question. At this time, Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva said to this elder Great Eloquence, Elder, today, for the sake of all sentient beings in the future and present, that is, the sentient beings of that time and sentient beings of the future, through the Buddha's awesome spiritual power and blessing, I will briefly explain the situation of karmic cause and effect. What is this situation? If a person dies and others perform virtuous deeds for them, what kind of merit will there be? When sentient beings of the future and present are near death, if they are able to hear the name of a Buddha, such as Namo Shakyamuni Buddha, Namo Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva, Namo such and such Pratyeka Buddha, I have made these two images here. One is Shakyamuni Buddha, and this one is the statue of Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva that His Holiness had made when he was alive. It should be Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva. Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva has various hand mudras, but people who do business might start speculating again. But regardless, when making statues of Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva, there actually isn't much difference. Below we have written Namo Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva. Actually, you can request these online yourselves. We don't need to make special arrangements, because right now if we send them to everyone from here, delivering and other aspects are not very convenient. You all can do it yourselves. It doesn't have to be done this way. The statue of Han tradition or Tibetan tradition either is fine. I think that everyone who is listening to the teachings should still have an image of Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva as an object of veneration. In the future, you can have one, or you can download it online. For sentient beings of the future and present, when they are near death, if they hear Namo Shakyamuni Buddha, Namo Amitabha Buddha, Namo Ratnasikin Tathagata, Namo Medicine Buddha, and so forth, the names of Buddhas or the names of Bodhisattvas, such as Namo Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, Namo Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva, Namo Manjushri Bodhisattva, then regardless of whether they are greatly sinful people or people without sins who are completely pure, all of them will attain liberation. I have also taught before that whether for people who are alive or for those who have already died, chanting the Buddha Amitabha's name for them, offering prayers for the deceased is extremely, extremely important. When we chant the Buddha Amitabha's name, we will also chant it quite often for ourselves as well. We should frequently chant the Buddha Amitabha's name. The merit of this is very great. Previously, there was a text called The Collection on Rebirth that was compiled by Master Lianchi at that time. Inside, there are many accounts of rebirth. Among them was one named Zhang Shanhe. Throughout his entire life, he created negative karma and made his living by killing. Later, when he was approaching death, many animals appeared to demand his life, to take his life. At this time, he was extremely frightened, and he told his wife, "Could you immediately invite a monk to come help me repent to repent?" Then when the monk was invited to come, the monk said to him, "According to the view of the Contemplation Sutra, when one is near death, if terrifying scenes appear, chanting the Buddha Amitabha's name wholeheartedly can lead to rebirth in the Pure Land." He told him to let go of everything, to burn incense while chanting the Buddha Amitabha's name. At that time, with his right hand holding fire and his left hand holding incense, while chanting the Buddha Amitabha's name, before reaching 10 recitations, he personally saw Buddha Amitabha coming to welcome him, and at that very moment, he was reborn in the Pure Land. So, when we are dying, if we chant the Buddha Amitabha's name, we often say that at the time of death, we should create virtuous connections. Because at the time of death, if we create negative connections, even though throughout our entire life we practice virtue, at that moment, because of that final thought near death, the conditions near death are extremely important for the deceased. So generally, at the time of death, we can say it is a critical moment. At that time, between virtue and negativity, going up to the upper realms or going down to the lower realms, it is the most crucial moment. So at that time, the people around us should also pay special attention. We should try our best to perform virtuous deeds for them, to create a virtuous atmosphere for them. We absolutely must not at that time, for example, divide up family assets or be extremely sorrowful. This way, it is not particularly beneficial for the deceased. So repentance near death and virtuous thoughts near death are especially important. Previously, there was a sutra called the Nagasena Bhikshu Sutra. I think I have mentioned it before. Actually, the Nagasena Bhikshu Sutra is an extremely ancient sutra that appeared before the Common Era. It has two versions, the South Edition and the North Edition. The South Edition is highly valued in the Theravada tradition. It is called the Milinda Panha, which they hold in high regard. As for the North Edition, in Chinese, it is in the Tripitaka. There seem to be two versions, but both are not very complete, and the translators are not clearly identified. But from a worldwide perspective, the Nagasena Bhikshu Sutra is highly valued. It should have been translated into many languages and scripts around the world. It has already been translated. In this text, it mainly describes the situation of karmic cause and effect. There is a dialogue between a king and Bhikshu Nagasena at that time. At that time, the king also asked, "Why do some people commit all kinds of negative deeds, but at the time of death, by performing a virtuous deed just once, they do not fall into the lower realms? What is the reason for this?" I think I have used this example before. This bhikshu said, We have 100 large stones, but if we place them all on a boat, they will not sink. If we place a small stone on the ocean, it will sink down. So it is said that if one has committed evil but has not repented well, even though it is just one negative deed, it is very possible that because of this, one may fall into hell. So the conditions at the time of our death are also very important for each individual. For example, we ourselves may feel that in various aspects things might not be particularly good right now, because our ways of dying are all kinds of different. Some might be from car accidents or from sudden disasters, earthquakes, and so forth. We might not have time for visualization. Many may not have time. At most, we can use some pith instructions for instant rebirth. Directing our consciousness upward, or visualizing Amitabha Buddha or Padmasambhava at the crown of our head, or visualizing at the heart center, it is best to use such methods. But if it is not like this, if we truly have some time to contemplate for now, at such a time, at the time of our death, it is best not to have negative connections for rebirth. Otherwise, afterwards, we will directly fall into lower realms. So below it says, if there are men or women who in life did not cultivate virtuous causes and committed all kinds of negativity. Here it does not say virtuous men and virtuous women. If men or women, when they were alive, did not properly cultivate the causes of virtue and also committed all kinds of negative karma after death, relatives of all ages create merit for them if they perform virtuous deeds. If they perform virtuous deeds for this deceased person, then among the merit of these holy deeds of these 7 parts, the deceased will receive 1 part. The other 6 parts of merit will benefit the living themselves. In some other sutras, this is not very obvious. But is this reasonable? Actually, it can be, because the views of each sutra are different, and the hidden meanings of each sutra are also different. Generally speaking, some sutras teach that when the living dedicate merit to the deceased, they receive all the merit. There are also such teachings in sutras and pith instructions. There are also some teachings that say they receive half, that they receive 3/10, that they receive 1/7. According to the view of the Ksitigarbha Sutra, if we recite, for example, 70,000 mani mantras, then this deceased person will receive 10,000 and the living will receive 60,000. We, the living, will also receive them ourselves. Actually, when we recite sutras for others, we ourselves will truly receive merit as well. In the words of my perfect teacher, it is also taught that Patrul Rinpoche said, if one acts as a prayer reciter and recites with an especially sincere altruistic mind, then the so-called sitting on someone else's cushion to accumulate one's own merit, this should be the meaning. But as for the exact wording, I remember the original Tibetan, but I'm not sure if the Chinese is translated this way. Anyway, the meaning is sitting on someone else's cushion to perfect one's own accumulations. The meaning is that when someone asks you to recite prayers, you sit on someone else's cushion, but actually with the merit from reciting prayers, you yourself also receive it. According to the view of the Ksitigarbha Sutra, we ourselves are already the greatest recipients. It might be mainly because each sutra is different and also because the motivation is different. For example, if the person reciting dedicates wholeheartedly, thinking, this deceased person is so pitiful, may they soon be free from suffering and attain happiness. If they dedicate with an especially sincere mind, they should receive a lot. If they do not dedicate in this way, relying on a natural interdependence, the deceased will also receive a portion. Therefore, virtuous men and virtuous women of the future and present should cultivate themselves while hearing well and being healthy. Every part they will fully receive. If virtuous men and virtuous women cultivate well themselves here, hearing well means the 6 faculties are complete. Eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and so on are very complete. Being healthy means one's body is healthy. The meaning is, when our 6 faculties are complete and our body is in good health, at this time we should practice well. When the conditions in various aspects are favorable for you, if you cultivate very well yourself, then you will receive every part of the merit. Therefore, generally speaking, when we perform virtuous deeds, we should not keep waiting for others to perform power for you, for others to dedicate merit for you, for others to recite sutras for you. At that time, Patrul Rinpoche also taught in the words of my perfect teacher, when the consciousness has departed from the body, the consciousness wanders in the Bardo, wandering like a dazed dog. Unless it is a greatly accomplished master, Patrul Rinpoche said, "For someone like me, it is of no avail. It is very difficult." So truly, if you yourself do not have confidence while you are still alive, if you yourself have not cultivated merit very well, and at the time of death you rely on others to perform vowa for you, then it will be quite difficult. Therefore, while you yourself are alive, while you are present, while you have freedom, when the conditions in various aspects are favorable, and also when the conditions of this precious human existence are favorable, at this time it is best to practice. Listening to and contemplating the Dharma are also very important. For example, studying the 5 great treatises for everyone, especially for many of you who are sentient beings with heavy conceptual thinking, if we do not analyze with the power of Buddhist wisdom, it will be difficult to sever the wrong views and negative habits in our mind streams. But if we only listen to and contemplate and do not practice very well, I am afraid it will not have much meaning. So for everyone, it should be that listening and contemplation are very important, but even more important is actual practice. Actually, no matter how long you listen and contemplate, when you leave this place, you yourself should obtain something. There is a Tibetan saying that goes something like this: words remembered in the mind, provisions preserved in the bosom. The approximate meaning is this: when you go somewhere, you should obtain some teachings. If you have not obtained teachings, whether at some Buddhist academy or some place, you have already stayed for 10 years, 8 years, 20 years, and when you return, you are exactly the same as when you first got there. It probably does not have much meaning. You must certainly obtain some Dharma. I often think like this. For example, you go to study, you go to some place, and at that place you take a few photos. Then you often argue with Dharma friends, your health is not good. You often receive IV drips. You spend a lot of money on living there. And apart from this, when you return, your mind stream is exactly the same as when you first got there. You have not gained any benefit at all. I think seeking precious Dharma is not like this. When the great masters of the past sought Dharma teachings, when they first went there, they were ordinary beings. When they returned, they were realized beings. It was like this. Their harvest was full. We can say they returned fully laden with accomplishments. So when we are seeking Dharma teachings, we must definitely examine our own mind stream, whether our own mind stream has been transformed or not. Some people, although they have not gone to another Buddhist academy to study, but when you study Buddhism and listen to teachings, it is the same. If you only listen to teachings theoretically and regard Buddhist teachings as just an ordinary corporate lecturer's speech, and after it is finished, you forget it, with such a result, I think, if we compare it to a worldly class, I am afraid the harvest will not be very great. So I myself think that no matter what Dharma you study, within this Dharma, you must definitely obtain the essential part. For each of us, if we have obtained the Dharma, you must definitely practice a portion of it. If you do not practice it and leave it at the theoretical level, the Guru's words will just be the Guru's words, and the words of the great masters of the past will just be their words. In this way, words are just words, and if our minds are still bound by attachment, hatred, and ignorance, of course, we can plant a habitual tendency. We can plant a virtuous habitual tendency. Apart from this, it is just the merit of listening to the Dharma. As for the merit of listening to the Dharma, its power is also not particularly strong. It only leaves on your alaya a seed that is not particularly obvious. After how many kalpas can this seed be triggered? No one can really say. So I think for everyone, it says here, when the 6 faculties are complete and being healthy, cultivate yourself. Every part you will fully receive. When we are alive, especially when you encounter the Mahayana Dharma, when you encounter the Vajrayana teachings, you yourself should at least have a kind of, I always say, you yourself should gain a kind of confidence. You do not need to say you truly have freedom over life and death. Such confidence is hard to speak of. In the commentary on ascertainment of the 3 types of vows, there is a citation, I believe. Ordinary beings like us cannot perform the conduct of yogins. Yogins cannot perform the conduct of Mahasiddhas. Mahasiddhas cannot perform the conduct of Buddhas. For each of us, our own conduct has requirements level by level. So, for ordinary beings like us, you just say, oh, I have attained the realization of a Buddha or the realization of a Bodhisattva or the realization of a Mahasiddha. I think this has certain difficulties. If you act in this way, I am afraid it is not necessarily reasonable, because your mind stream is exactly the same as an ordinary being's, but as for your conduct, you perform the conduct of Mahasiddhas and Yogins. In this way, I am afraid your view and your conduct cannot correspond. If they do not correspond, this Dharma for your mind stream will also not be beneficial. So, what does it teach here? It teaches, when the 6 faculties are complete and being healthy, cultivate yourself. Every part you will fully receive. This is very important. Below, it teaches, the great ghost of impermanence can come at any time. Personally, these 2 lines, only 8 characters in Chinese, I still find very moving, with profound meaning. For each and every one of us, will we be able tomorrow to live healthily in this world? It is also very hard to say. Perhaps for some of us, today we are healthy and lively, but tomorrow they will be in an extremely unfamiliar world, where our current way of life is completely different. So, on the road to death, there is no distinction between young and old. Many of us think we ourselves are young, that we ourselves have no problems, but actually it is not necessarily like this. So, in the way of the Bodhisattva, it is also taught, the Lord of Death is not to be trusted. He does not wait for negative karma to be purified or not. This Lord of Death is not reliable. He will not wait for you to see whether your negative karma is purified, whether your accumulations are perfected. Whether sick or not sick, one's fleeting life cannot be relied upon. In the way of the Bodhisattva, it is taught in this way. Whether you are sick or not sick, or whether your affairs are finished or not finished, he will not keep waiting for you. Have you finished this matter? If you have finished, then I will come. He will not be like this. For many of us, perhaps some matters, we have not had time at all, and the Lord of Death has already appeared. This should be in our Buddhism an especially sublime method of practice. This method of practice should have great meaning for everyone. Personally, I should have very strong feelings about impermanence practice. And I myself also think I practice it quite well. No matter what happens or what I see, I still have a very good view of impermanence. Once impermanence appears in my life, in my human existence, or in my life itself, I should be the one who can accept it most easily. So, I think this impermanence, on the one hand, it is a kind of practice. On the other hand, we should also be prepared at all times. This is very important. In the Sutra of the Sublime Dharma of Clear Recollection, it is also taught, the wise constantly contemplate death. There is no place to escape. Those with wisdom frequently contemplate this, just as Master Yin Guang did, contemplating death and impermanence. Remembering death is most sublime. Among all recollections, none can compare. Contemplating death and impermanence is the most sublime in our practice. In the sutras, it is also taught that among all footprints, the footprint of the elephant is the best. Among all contemplations, death and impermanence are the most sublime. So it is also incomparable. The reason lies here. For each of us, at the very least, we ourselves, for any matter, should be prepared at all times. I myself, whether for death or for reality, am prepared at all times for many things. Once any impermanence appears, I will face it positively. I will respond positively. But in my practice, this is also not particularly rare. Why is it like this? I will not be like this. So in this world of ours, the great ghost of impermanence truly comes at any time. We have not made any appointment with him at all, but he suddenly appears. This appearance is also very good. From another perspective, this impermanence should be a very good reminder for everyone, and also a very good opportunity for practice. Below it teaches, the consciousness of the departed one then wanders in darkness, not knowing how his offenses and merits will turn out overall. In the Bardo, our wandering consciousness, our consciousness, does not know what his offenses are like, or what his merits are like, what merit is like, or what negativity is like. Throughout the entire 7-day periods, 49 days, it is just like an extremely ignorant, extremely pitiful, mute and deaf person. or in such an intermediate state, the karma of ordinary sentient beings manifests, and the Lord of Death and his subordinates, through debate and discussion, determine the severity of his negative karma. Then his karmic results will be examined and determined. After examination and determination, according to the magnitude of his karma, the severity of his karma, he will fall into different realms, either into the 3 lower realms or be reborn in the 3 higher realms. Before this is determined in the Bardo, there are thousands upon thousands of sufferings, extremely, extremely painful. Actually, according to the view of the Ksitigarbha Sutra, the intermediate consciousness, it should be said that it has all kinds of different states and is also in an extremely ignorant state. It is like a person in our worldly realm who can neither be sentenced nor released. Some criminals nowadays are like this. They remain in detention, still have not entered to the prison. If they actually enter prison, that would still be okay. I know of some people who have already been there for 2 or 3 years. They are neither sentenced nor released. They remain in between. At one moment, they say his case needs to be re-examined, and so they keep waiting and waiting. For many years, it is like this. So the intermediate consciousness is also like this. At that time, they especially hope for their karma to be determined quickly, no matter if it is falling into hell or going to the other realms. Of course, for a very few sentient beings, it is quite fast. Sentient beings who have committed the 5 crimes with immediate retribution, who have created the causes for the Vajra hell, for these, in an instant, there is no Bardo at all. They do not need to go through the Bardo. Or those who have realized Trekcho in Vajrayana, going up or down is a matter of an instant, except for those with extremely keen faculties. There is simply no way to notice there is a period of Bardo. As taught in the Lama Yangtik, there is simply no way. But for most other sentient beings in the intermediate state, it is extremely painful, waiting for the judgment of the subordinates of the Lord of Death as sentient beings' karma manifests. And they may also experience the suffering of hell, the suffering of hungry ghosts, and so forth. So in this Bardo, with so many thousands upon thousands of sufferings, how much more so if one falls into the lower realms? If you truly fall into the lower realms, that suffering is beyond words. The deceased who has not yet received rebirth, this deceased person who has not yet received rebirth, within the 7 7-day periods, 49 days, in every thought, day and night, constantly yearning for their living family and relatives, to create merit for them, to rescue them. This is very important. So if we are alive, we Tibetans often say the difference between the living and the dead is that we, as the living, should create more merit for them. For example, if a family member dies, even if the household is quite poor, we should still create more merit for them. What is the reason? After all, we are in the human realm, and in the human realm we will not starve to death. We should still do more virtuous deeds for them. After all, that deceased person in the intermediate state has no freedom at all. So no matter how poor we are, we should do more for them. In the process of doing this, as I also taught the other day, it is best to write down the name of the deceased. For example, such and such deceased person. For example, now when we recite sutras for the deceased, or when we perform phawa for them, of course, if it is a sentient being within the 49 days, we can also write down their name. If they have passed away for many, many years, for example, your ancestors or your grandfather, grandmother, and so forth, if you know their names, then write down their names. Even if you offer just 5 yuan or 10 yuan, ask the Sangha to recite. They should recite their names. If they have long been submerged in hell or in the hungry ghost realm, relying on the power of interdependence, it is very important to recite their names. I place great importance on this. But later, I noticed that when some Dharma friends recite sutras for the deceased, some do not write down names. Writing down names is not only a practice in Tibetan area. I have also seen in the Buddha Speaks of Abhisheka Sutra that it says, "For the deceased, call out their name and cultivate all virtuous deeds." In the Buddha Speaks of Abhisheka Sutra, it is also taught this way. So we should call out their names. We have a saying, "This family is so poor that they do not even have anyone to mention their names." There is such a saying. So for deceased sentient beings, we should also recite in this way. Or if your friends and relatives die within the 49 days, try as much as possible every day to have the Sangha recite sutras for them. In this way, for them, It is extremely, extremely necessary. Then, after this period has passed, after that period just mentioned, the Bardo has probably already ended. After this period of days, they will receive retribution according to their karma. This person may, if the karma they created is quite severe for hundreds or thousands of years, there will be no liberation. If the karma created is extremely severe, in this way, they may fall into other realms. If they have committed the karma of the incessant hell, they will fall into the great hells. This means for thousands of kalpas, tens of thousands of kalpas, eternally suffering manifold torments. Indeed, we in the human realm now have freedom. If one has no faith, I think there is no helping it, because of ignorance or education or various aspects. But having faith, at the very least, for especially grave sins, we ourselves should be a bit more cautious. If we ourselves can control our own afflictive emotions, we should be a bit more cautious. This might be better. Otherwise, in our human realm, the 5 crimes with immediate retribution, and also, for example, violating the Vajrayana vows among Vajra brothers and sisters, or with one's Vajra guru, and also killing sentient beings or revealing secrets and so forth. There are many Vajrayana vows that, compared to the incessant hell, according to the Tantras, are even more terrifying than the incessant hell, especially in the treasury of the Supreme Vehicle, which discusses samaya and empowerment. Truly, sometimes when discussing samaya, at such times one's hair stands on end. It is extremely frightening. Of course, for people without faith, they feel these are all legends, that these things will not necessarily happen to them. But for us as Buddhist practitioners, if we keep talking about reciting the Amitabha Buddha's name and believing in cause and effect, but our actual conduct goes against this, perhaps it is sentient beings' karma manifesting, and perhaps it can only be like this. So, committing the 5 crimes with immediate retribution. We often speak of killing one's father, killing one's mother, but nowadays are there such cases? It is also very hard to say. This era is becoming worse and worse, and the afflictive emotions in sentient beings' mind streams are becoming more and more severe. If one truly falls into the great hells, compared to what we experience now in the human realm, not having a meal for a day, being cold for a day, or feeling uncomfortable in one's mood, or having got some illness, if we use this as a comparison, there is simply no comparison at all. So we should also pay attention to this kind of negative karma. After this it says, furthermore, elder, after the death of such a being with wrongdoing karma, his parents, children, and relatives may make vegetarian meal offerings to help him in his karmic path, then make vegetarian meal offerings, make offerings to the Buddha and Sangha, and create merit to help them purify their karmic path. It can be regarded as a kind of provisions for them, also a kind of provisions for the journey. In this way, there are some requirements here. If making vegetarian meal offerings, there are some methods here. What are these methods? In the process of preparing such a meal and before that offering is completed, before the meal offering or during the meal offering period, what are the matters that need attention? One is the rice rinsing water, the water from rinsing rice, and also vegetable leaves. The yellow leaves of the vegetables offered to the Sangha, these cannot be randomly thrown on the ground. When making offerings to the Sangha, there must be some proper sequence. Whether it is rice or vegetables, these should not be wasted casually. Then, when consuming the food before offering to all Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, or before offering to the Sangha, offering to the Buddha as the benefactor, the one making the meal offering, you yourself cannot eat first. If you eat first, this is also not proper, because in some cases, before offering to the Sangha, you yourself have already eaten, and such behavior is also not proper. If there is any transgression or laxness in this matter, the deceased will not receive the merits mentioned earlier. Conversely, if one is diligent in maintaining purity, first, the food offered to the Sangha should be made especially clean. And first, do not eat it yourself. First, offer it to the Sangha, offer it to the Buddha. In such cases, first present the offerings to the Buddha and Sangha. The deceased will receive 1/7. Then the sutra continues. Therefore, elder, if after the death of parents and relatives, living beings of Jambudvipara are able to make vegetarian meal offerings in their behalf with diligence, sincerity, and a resolute mind, especially for the deceased, generally, one should make vegetarian meal offerings. If you yourself do not have the capacity to make all the meal offerings, then within the meal offerings you can just make some contributions with rejoicing. For example, on the anniversary of your parents' death, or within the 49 days, or during Dharma gatherings, when thinking of them, you should also do this. Of course, every time we teach about making offerings to the Sangha, making vegetarian meal offerings, many people are quite enthusiastic. At that time, there are also some who use the name of making meal offerings and then do all kinds of things themselves. Such people will also appear. So everyone should be cautious about this. Apart from the truly public accounts of our Sangha, you must definitely pay attention. Otherwise, sometimes when I teach about these merits, I am also very cautious. Some lay practitioners are also quite enthusiastic. When teaching about building Buddha statues, oh, this merit is very great. Then there are some thieves online too, saying, send money here for building Buddha statues. After a while, the account is gone and the money is gone too. Nowadays, there are especially many thieves online. So when making offerings to the Sangha, some people are also constantly soliciting donations in the name of making offerings to the Sangha. Actually, this is very bad. The influence is not good. It should be voluntary. These things should not be forced. I do not recommend organizing many things now, organizing this and that, because at this special time, the organizers themselves also have certain risks, so everyone should act lawfully and reasonably. Whatever virtuous deeds you do are your own affair. There is no need to persuade others. Some people do nothing themselves, but keep telling others, you should do this, you should do that. What each person should do, they should understand themselves. If you can do it yourself, then do it yourself. You do not need to be a liaison person, and you do not need to be a publicist. Each person should have their own virtuous roots for performing virtuous deeds. When they have virtuous roots, they themselves can do it. Otherwise, some people may even snatch others' wealth to use for making offerings. This may not necessarily be appropriate in this current era, especially as Buddhist practitioners, as Mahayana Buddhist practitioners. Our image and various aspects are also very important, especially now. A very few individuals often use the name of gurus to organize such things. What I most detest is some using gurus' names, doing no virtuous deeds themselves, yet constantly organizing such things. I mentioned this a couple of days ago, but later there were still such people. I also discovered this yesterday and the day before yesterday. Some are also using the guru's name, doing this everywhere. Of course, these people probably do not listen to the teachings. Generally, they are secretly specializing in organizing such things. This is their profession. They also have their purposes. Some people may also be altruistic, but mainly there is also a component of self-benefit involved. It is possible. Because they are especially enthusiastic, they may not necessarily have such an altruistic mind. So sometimes if they truly have an altruistic mind, then others can do it themselves. Why must they insist on organizing these things? Perhaps some are not necessarily like this. So every time we teach about making meal offerings at such times, there will also be all kinds of situations. It says here, for the deceased, for other sentient beings, make vegetarian meal offerings, make offerings with a sincere and diligent mind. This is very important. It should be with a sincere mind. Even if it is just a little bit, it is fine. It does not have to be such and such amount. There is no need for this. In this way, both the living and the deceased will gain benefit. Both those who are alive and those who have died will gain benefit. As these words were spoken, thousands of myriads of millions of Nayutas, of ghosts and spirits of Jambudvipa, who were in the Triyastrimsa heaven, all gave rise to the immeasurable Bodhi mind. Elder Great Eloquence also made obeisance and withdrew. Now let us continue a little more. Below is chapter 8, the praise of King Yama and his retinue for Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva. At this time, within the iron encircling mountains, there were immeasurable ghost kings. These ghost kings and King Yama all arrived at the Triyastrimsa heaven and came to where the Buddha was. At that time, which ghost kings came? The ones we recognize include Ghost King Evil Poison. He has already come before. There is also Ghost King Many Evils. I think in some individual commentaries there are different explanations for each ghost king. I do not know if they truly exist in the sutras, but actually there are also different explanations and elaborations. If such explanations exist, that is fine. But if we do not explain them, that is also fine. We know that what our physical eyes cannot see, actually in this world, there are especially many ghosts, maras, intermediate consciousnesses, as well as rakshasas and non-humans, extremely many. So, our Buddhism is extremely comprehensive. Whether it is people's present and future lives or in the present world, whether it is heaven or hell, ghosts or spirits, the entire description of sentient beings in the 6 realms, what our physical eyes simply cannot see, what our dualistic thoughts simply cannot conceive of, many issues are explained extremely meticulously. Especially regarding ghosts and spirits, many materialists do not accept their existence. They do not accept it, but there is no reason. It is only because in their textbooks it is not mentioned. When some individual teachers mention it, they simply treat it as mythology or superstition, or answer in this way. Actually, this is not reasonable. In our actual life, ghosts and spirits should be everywhere around us. We also often encounter them, we often see them, or we often hear about them. Even when we have nightmares, we can discover this. Apart from what we see with our physical eyes, other beings truly exist. So this kind of denial probably has certain difficulties, and there is also no need to deny it, because in some materialist views, the reasons for their denial have never existed. When I was studying in the past, we had a teacher Z. I debated with him every day. Although at that time I had not studied Buddhist logic, I still did not accept the reasoning that ghosts and spirits do not exist. Your thought, there is something wrong with your thinking. His relationship with me was not very good. He kept saying, your thought, and he stammers a little, your thought, there is something wrong with your thinking. When you grow up, you will have no future, you will have no accomplishment. Debating with a teacher is also not very good. This is definitely not good. Teachers have bestowed kindness, but when there are differences in views, sometimes there are slight conflicts, which is also normal. We were debating. We did not have any conflict. I do not know if he is still alive now. At that time, his age was quite advanced. He is probably no longer here. Perhaps he is listening to the teachings. I do not know. The so-called Ghost King Evil Poison, Ghost King Many Evils, Ghost King Great Quarrels, Ghost King White Tiger, Ghost King Blood Tiger, Ghost King Red Tiger, Ghost King Disseminating Disasters, Ghost King Flying Body. Actually, each of these should be able to, there should be some similar explanations. Ghost King Lightning Flash, Ghost King Wolf Teeth, Ghost King Thousand Eyes. Actually, in the descriptions, their features have been explained. Ghost King Beast Devouring, Ghost King Rock Carrying, one who specifically devours fierce beasts, wild beasts, and some in appearance carry stones. Perhaps it is due to the manifestation of karma. There is also Ghost King presiding over depletion, one who depletes wealth. When he is in a household, all your things will be gone in a moment. If he is in your wallet, the money will quickly be depleted and gone. So if money disappears in a moment, it means Ghost King presiding over depletion is hiding in your wallet. Then there is Ghost King presiding over calamities. Car accidents and such are presided over by Ghost King presiding over calamities. There is also Ghost King presiding over food, often present in dining halls. Ghost King presiding over wealth. Ghost King presiding over domestic animals. Ghost King presiding over fowls, for example, avian influenza. It mainly affects fowls. Ghost King presiding over beasts, Ghost King presiding over goblins, Ghost King presiding over birth. Generally regarding childbirth, there are more in obstetrics and gynecology hospitals than Ghost King presiding over life, one who demands life, or as was just mentioned, Ghost King presiding over illnesses, mainly presiding over illnesses. Ghost King presiding over danger. Some dangerous roads. These places have Ghost King presiding over danger. Ghost King 3 Eyes, Ghost King 4 Eyes, Ghost King 5 Eyes, and also King Chilishi. King Daki Lishi, King Chilicha, King Daki Licha, King Anuoja, King Da Anuoja. Great Ghost Kings such as these, each with hundreds or thousands of minor Ghost Kings, extremely many. They all reside in Jambudvipa. Each has their own specialty, their own areas of jurisdiction and control. What each Ghost King presides over just mentioned is different. So truly, these ghosts and spirits in our human world should be everywhere. If we perform smoke offerings, dedicate merit, and recite mantras, in this way these ghosts and spirits will also attain liberation. These ghost kings, as well as King Yama, relying on the Buddha's awesome spiritual penetration, and also the blessing of Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva Mahasattva, all arrived at the Trayastrimsa heaven standing to one side. Wow, so many ghost kings. The scene is very frightening. What? Those with 3 eyes, those with 1,000 eyes, all standing there. Let us stop here then. All the ghosts are standing there. Let them take a look. Otherwise, shall we continue a bit further? It is a bit frightening, although they are in the Trayastrimsa heaven. At this time, King Yama knelt down, joined his palms, and addressed the Buddha. World-honored one, we today, along with so many ghost kings, because he is King Yama, now he is Emperor Yama, there are also many ghost kings. Through the Buddha's awesome spiritual penetration and also the blessing of Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva, we have arrived at this great assembly in the Trayastrimsa heaven. This is also our good fortune. This time we have with great difficulty. In the past we were always busy with harming sentient beings. This time, for 2 or 3 days, we get to listen to teachings. We are still very fortunate. He said, I today have a small doubt. I dare to ask the world-honored one. I hope the world-honored one will compassionately expound on it for us. So let us stop here.
Jirgana Jirano Chupan Chupun Sonen Droa Droa
Bandangara Badna Sadarda Bandangara Badna Sada Bandangara Badna Sadarda